But if it's just my fellow Americans, people of the world, we are not alone, everyone's going to be like, okay, great. And to steal a line from a friend of mine, John Alexander, does any of this mean that we don't have to go to work on Monday morning? No, it doesn't. You do have to go to work on the Monday morning after disclosure.
I thought they would cancel classes and
sadly not.
Tell everybody to go home.
You might have to do a school project on it, but they won't cancel school, and they certainly won't cancel work.
Anybody else like to comment on that before we have many questions?
He said it well.
Okay, excellent. We don't want another Trump question, so I'll just move on. One question for Steve. You mentioned John Podesta and his interest in UFOs and the Clinton administration perhaps coming close to becoming the disclosure administration, and then Hillary coming close. Is it possible that Hillary's stated interest in disclosing the UFO information was simply a grab for votes?
Right. I think those of you that have followed this issue for these many years, talking about ETs and UFOs, look, even a few years ago, just go into work. Get down with it, you know, have a little lunch break with your fellow employees, including your boss, and say, you know, had a couple of grays turn up in my bedroom the other night. They elevated me out of my bed and they floated me out the window, but they didn't open the window. They went right through that sucker. And then I went up into a ship and we had some work done. You think that's going to help your employee situation? Has any other politician gone for the UFO vote? No, never.
It will help if your boss says, don't you hate it when that happens?
Oh, yeah. You hope the boss says that. No, I'll be very frank. Clinton and Podesta and Barack and Richardson were all had to speak to that issue because their nemesis, Stevie Bassett, had finally gotten the media on their tail. And they were getting questions from everywhere, and the articles were everywhere. If that had not happened, if I had not gotten the money and gone to D.C. in 2014, they would have been absolutely silent on the issue.
And a quick follow-up, Steve. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but what is very important to note, however, right, is that, think about it. All those debates, all those forums, all the opportunities for the Republican candidates and the Democratic candidates working against her to attack her on that issue. Oh, tinfoil hat Hillary, right? She's a wacko. She's a nut job, which that's happened before. They didn't do it. She was never attacked on this issue by anyone. And this goes all the way back to 2008. Why? The truth is very simple. The Republican leadership, the hierarchy, the intelligentsia, are fully aware there's an extraterrestrial presence. The Republicans are more connected to the military intelligence complex than the Democrats. They've been tipped off. They know it's true, but they're very supportive of the military and the Department of Defense, and they don't want to rock that boat.
All right.
So what happens if they attack a candidate over that issue and then the DTs turn up a week later? They're looking pretty embarrassed, aren't they? That just gives you a sense of how bizarre this is. No, it wasn't to get UFO votes, trust me.
The politics of extraterrestrials.
Yes.
Can I go back just real quickly?
Yes,
to
go
that,
ahead, Travis.
the Space Force thing. There was a very high percentage of the shuttle missions that had mission cargoes that were classified, secret, yeah. And you know, there's these things called anti-satellite satellites, and probably most of what they were doing was that, in my view.
Now we have military shuttles that we don't know what the heck they've been doing in orbit as well.
I've got a story on that. I talked with an astronaut at length, a very nice fellow, retired, and he told me about his situation, and that was, and you're up next, John. He was part of the military space program, right? Shuttle astronaut. You don't know his name. You weren't going to know his name. And he was scheduled to go up in a new shuttle out of Vandenberg. It was a special situation. because this is going to put a military satellite in polar orbit as opposed to the standard orbit. And because of that, it takes a lot more thrust to get up there because you don't get to use the Earth's rotation. And so this shuttle was made out of ceramics. Think Dreamliner, right? They had to use a lot of ceramic stuff and this new other tech in order to lighten it. And the test had not gone well, and all of the crew felt they were not going to survive this particular mission. And just very shortly, a couple days before they launched from Vandenberg, the shuttle Challenger disaster occurred, and it blew up, and they canceled it. And he never got to go into space, but he says if he'd gone, he would die. And that's my story about that.
Okay, John, you've been too quiet for too long.
Oh no, the only thing, I'm glad Travis brought it back up, because the only thing I would add from a historical standpoint on the DoD connection to space, and not many people actually know / talk about this, but there are declassified documents that go right back to the beginning of the Apollo missions. And there are declassified documents that I got under FOIA that had never been out before, made quite a few headlines too, on a project called Project Horizon. And Horizon was, we all knew the public space race with the Soviets, and we were going to land on the moon, and it was going to be a scientific triumph, and it was going to be great and grand and glory. But behind the scenes, and this is all documented now, the Department of Defense got in on it with a project called Project Horizon, and secretly in the Apollo missions they were going to start building a defense structure on the moon for defensive purposes. And the DoD had the plans and the schematics. I even have the drawings. It's a fascinating look at history. Obviously never came out. But anyway, the DoD connection to space and this, military presence in space goes right back to the beginning. There was actually declassified documents that I got called Project A119. They were going to take a nuclear weapon to the moon and detonate it, just to see what happened. And so again, it was the military application that was going to be put into space. Now today we have the X-33 that does record-breaking times in space. We have no idea what it is. My FOIAs are rejected. They give me press releases that are the stupid things they have on their website about the X-33. There's a lot of cool stuff going on with that they won't tell us. But anyway, I just wanted to add the historical context that it actually goes right back to the beginning days of the space race, that the DoD had their fingers pretty much in it since day one.
It's kind of eerie to see information that's been leaked about those military shuttles. You see the crews boarding the vessels, because everybody thinks there's no more space shuttles from the U.S., but that's wrong. And John, since you mentioned bases on the moon, I actually got several questions about that. What's your feeling on the possibility that NASA hasn't been straight up with us, and that perhaps they found structures on the moon that could not be explained? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I do. When I was young on the internet, you see a lot of those stories, and those were some of the first I pursued. And I ended up writing a letter to Neil Armstrong, and I think I was like 16 at the time. And I actually got a response, and I copy and pasted, the photographs that you see on the moon, that Armstrong had lights over his head or structures on the moon, and the quotes that were attributed to him and so on. And he wrote me back via his administrative aide, but they assured me that all of that was internet hoaxes. Now, I don't know if that's gospel or not, but they took the time to write. In my opinion, I have a strong family connection. My dad worked on the space shuttle, so I grew up, being fairly entrenched in all of that. NASA is a very difficult agency for me to deal with, but they're also my favorite one, so it makes me cringe to say that. But honestly, I just don't see enough evidence at all. I think this day and age, with the powerful telescopes that we do have, where we can see the tracks from the Apollo missions, when the rovers landed, that's how sophisticated a lot of our ground-based telescopes are now. That if there was something to find on the crater edge or something like that, we would have found it by now.
And a follow-up to that, John, somebody mentioned secret stuff on the dark side of the moon, which never faces us, and so we have no real hard evidence of what's there or isn't there. What about the dark side?
From a scientific standpoint, I don't think it's possible. You don't have an environment for it. Sure, alien life can live in a very different environment, but they've also mapped the dark side. It's kind of a misconception that that it's just a complete mystery to us, and it's not. There are ways for them to, in essence, see. Granted, it's not lit up, but there are ways. So is that a possibility? I mean, sure, anything is. I would side more that not intelligent life, but that there would be life hidden in a crevice on Mars versus the moon. But again, I know you're dealing with intelligent life and structures versus that, but I just don't see that happening.
Good, thank you, John. And we've probably done enough moon exploration. Nobody want to add anything to it? We'll go on then. So we talked about, you guys talked about earlier about the fact that if disclosure happens now, it seems that people really wouldn't be that shocked. So, given that, and whoever wants to take this, why do you think that the world's governments conspire still to this very day to keep the existence of UFOs hidden? I mean, what is their objective? What do they think would result from? Is it this chaos and anarchy that the other questioner asked us, or what is your opinion, if you would like to talk about that? Why are they keeping this from us?
That's my ballywick. I have 2-hour lectures on that subject. Again, the transition of the announcement of the ET presence will be the most profound event in human history. The ETs escalated their presence here in early 1947, almost certainly as a response to our creation and use of atomic bombs in Japan. They focused on our nuclear facilities initially and have turned off our weapons on numerous occasions, as well as in Russia. So there's a connection between our technological development, particularly in matters of war, and their presence. The Cold War itself was incredibly dangerous and existential. And America and world politics has become very, very complicated. And so, in other words, this has been a long labor to give birth to this baby, right? Any woman that's done that knows that it can be a long process. And it's not happening as fast as it should, but it will happen. It's inevitable. There are public relations issues. There are national security issues. There's PR. There is and political issues. In other words, how do we get this thing out? And because they have had to contain it for so long, it makes it more difficult. All I can say is that it will happen. That the civil rights movement took 100 years to get a Civil Rights Act passed in 1965 in the United States. The activism went on forever and ever, but they finally got it. And we will see disclosure. We'll see it, hopefully, very soon. And we'll learn then why it took so long. We'll learn more of the details. But you just have to consider the magnitude of it to understand why it's not something like, oh, well, let's just do it tomorrow. No, it's not that simple.
Well,
go ahead, Travis. It takes a moment.
I still come back to it depends on the nature of how it's announced. I mean, if the United States announced it, that's entirely different from if China or the Soviet Union is the one that did it. And if it came from a government entity versus whether there was some worldwide broadcast from ET saying we are here, you know, how that is perceived by the people receiving the message depends on where it comes from.
Very good. We've only got a few more minutes. I mean, if it were up to me, I'd stay here all night with you guys asking you the rest of these questions, but they're going to kick us out of the building in a little bit, so we don't have a choice on the time. So there's a couple here for Nick, who's been kind of quiet for a while. Have you zoned out on us, Nick, or are you okay?
No, I'm ready to go.
Okay.
He always looks zoned out. It's his natural look.
The listener or the audience member wants to know, Nick, which one incident in your experience is the most convincing for you of the alien presence on Earth? The one incident, and why?
Well, I think, without wanting to repeat much of my presentation, the Rendlesham Forest incident is probably the most compelling case in the British government's files, but that was before my time on the UFO project, though I did a cold case review of it. The most compelling case from my tour of duty, which was 1991 to 1994, was a lesser-known case from 1993 called the Cosford incident, COSFROD, and that was another UFO overflight of 2 military bases in the UK. There's plenty of information on the internet.
And also for Nick, has there ever been a moment in your career in intelligence for the British government or afterward where you felt afraid or threatened because of the information that you have been made privy to, or because of some specific UFO or paranormal related incident that you have knowledge about? Have you ever felt fearful or threatened in your career?
I've never felt directly threatened. If one of the possible implications of that is, have my former employees ever said, you know, keep quiet about this or else? That's not happened. I'm still bound by my secrecy oath. That binds me for life. I know where the line is and I don't cross it. There is some information that obviously I can't get into, not because it's we've got a spaceship in a hangar. I don't know whether that's true or not, but just methods and sources type thing. I don't think any of this particularly scares me. No, so I don't think any of the things I've been privy to make me concerned in terms of existential threats or anything.
But Nick, if you had that spaceship in the hangar, you wouldn't be able to tell us about it.
If I had that spaceship in a hangar, I would probably say no comment, but that's not what I'm saying.
That's
I'm saying
what I thought.
I literally have not seen that.
You just said no comment, so are you trying to...
Yeah.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
And the person who submitted this question, Susan, added this delightful note at the end that I'm going to share with you, Nick. Thank you for being so delightfully human.
Well, thank you very much, Susan.
So what exactly does it make us?
Inhuman? I don't know.
Curious.
We are getting close to the end. Probably can take one more question. And then the speakers will be available for a little bit up front, but then we have to clear the building, so they'll be around for a little bit, maybe 30 minutes or so. So many questions to pick from. I hesitate to, I don't know what to use last, but we talked about the moon. There were a lot of questions about the moon. I received, surprisingly, a lot of questions about something going on in Antarctica. Have any of you heard? There was no specifics in the questions, but several questions had to do with strange goings-on in Antarctica. Anybody would like to speak?
I have a feeling I know what that's about if nobody wants to jump in. The short of it is, ties back to the end of World War II and a secret Nazi base. And it ties into government documents that I did a television show on. I don't believe that there's a Nazi base down there, but I did appear on the show because I was talking about one of the projects that the Navy undertook, and it was the largest accumulation of military might that the military has ever done in the history of the military. And they sent it all down a couple years after the fall of the Third Reich into Antarctica. They claim it was a training mission, but it tied into a letter that I found that was declassified, that was written by one of Hitler's high-up generals. This is all a real story. But very quickly, what the letter said was Hitler had survived. This was written in 1947. Hitler was alive and well. He was in a specially made U-boat off the coast of Antarctica. That tied into the theories that there was a Nazi base down there. The V2 silos, they were able to get the hard water factories working. They had the nuclear-tipped silos, and they had V2s ready to go. I searched long and hard to see what the government intelligence community did with that letter. Was never able to find that they did anything except this massive naval exercise. Whether or not it tied in, I'll let you guys decide, but that's why we did the TV show on it, on a show called Unsealed. So I'm guessing that's what that Antarctica question.
Yeah, there was some allusion to that.
Nazis are involved in it.
Nazis, yeah. Are we going to announce the raffle winners? Yeah. So this is the very last thing. As we get ready to do that, let's give a big round of applause to our speakers. We appreciate them so much.